Morning, Chairperson. Yes, we may proceed. I think we do have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Anne. Okay. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Derek America. I'm the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Local Government. On behalf of the committee, I would like to welcome all our members present on the platform, all our guests, officials of the department, as well as the officials from the AG's office. We also have invited guests from Salga on the platform, ably led by Councillor Pint. Welcome to our meeting. Today is the 26th of July, and the primary focus of this particular meeting would be a briefing that we will receive from the AG's office regarding the consolidated audit outcomes of the municipalities in the Western Cape. Just for record purposes, this meeting is taking place via the MS Teams platform. It is also live stream on YouTube for members of the public and other interested stakeholders to follow the proceedings of the meeting. And we hope at the end of our meeting we would be relatively well informed as to what the state of the audit outcomes are for municipalities in the Western Cape. So, without much further ado, may I just establish for record purposes whether we have a quorum in the House, and may I ask the members to introduce themselves to establish that whether we have a quorum or not. Members, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, Chairperson. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, an alternate member to this committee, standing in for colleague Ricardo McKenzie, who has at very last minute received an invitation from PRASA to join them with their plans on the reopening of the Central Railway line here in the Western Cape. And thank you very much. Looking forward to joining you today.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Most welcome. Thank you. Any other members?
Good morning, honourable members. My name is Matlodi Maseko, and I'm the member to the Standing Committee.
Thank you, Honourable Maseko. Welcome.
Thank you.
Any other members? Okay. In the absence of any other members on the platform who would like to introduce themselves, we are 3 members on the committee, including myself, and that would constitute a quorum for this meeting. Therefore, we are properly curated, and we will then proceed with the meeting. So, colleagues, the next point on the agenda, may I just also remind our colleagues we are very conversant with the rules of engagement as far as MS Teams are concerned, and I shall not repeat those rules of engagement, save to say that should the need arise and an intervention need to be made, then surely it would be appropriate for me to, at the time, to make that intervention. Johan, we have received any apologies. I note that the HUD, Mr. Paulse, has rendered this apology, as well as Ms. Barnard, the Chief Director, Municipal Performance Monitoring and Support. Is there any other apology that you may be aware of that I'm not privy to?
Chairperson, no, I haven't received any other apologies. We may proceed.
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, with the Office of the Auditor General, we have a number of officials present, but I shall only mention the Acting Business Unit Leader, Ms. Cullen, and I'm sure that when the need should have arise, and she will then introduce her colleagues to the meeting. And then we have standing in for Mr. Paulser and Ms. Barnard. We have Dr. Grayling from the department, who is Director of Municipal Support and Capacity Building. And then also Mr. Rylands is Director District and Local Performance Monitoring. Then we also have a number of officials from Provincial Treasury present, led by the head of department, Mr. Savage, as well as Ms. Khantana, who is the Deputy Director General in Provincial Treasury. And then, as I said earlier, we have officials of SALGA present, as well as councillors. And I shall only but mention Councillor Pint, who is the Provincial Legislature representative. But then we also have Councillor Swart, Councillor Combring, and Mr. Armstrong Pimpela, and other SALGA officials present. Now, having dispensed with all the introductions, we then shall proceed. Mr. Kutse, I recognize you. Is there anything that I missed out?
Sorry about this, Chairperson. Just that I did receive a apology for Mr. David Savage, the HOD for Provincial Treasury. He could unfortunately not make it, so I did get his apology now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kutse. It's noted. So Ms. Fontana is leading the delegation. Am I correct in that assumption?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Okay, colleagues, having dispensed with all the introductions and the welcoming, we shall then now proceed with a briefing by the AG's Office on the Consolidated General Report on Local Governance Audit Outcomes, with specific reference to the audit outcomes of the municipalities in the Western Cape, and in particular the underperforming municipalities. So I shall hand over to Ms. Cullen, who will lead the delegation and direct this meeting in terms of how the report will be sort of dealt with, and thereafter I shall open the meeting to members for questions that they may wish to ask. Ms. Cullen, I'm not sure. Welcome, I see you, and I'll hand over to you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson, and good morning to all the honourable members and attendees for today's session. Indeed, we are here today to do the presentation for the MFMA audit outcomes for the Western Cape. I'm joined here by my two deputy business unit leaders. So, Honourable Chair, just a correction, I'm not the acting business unit leader. I am the business unit leader for the Western Cape Auditor General's Office. I'm joined by Ashley Olkers, who is my deputy business unit leader, and Thomas Mamokwe, who is also a deputy business unit leader in the office. With me today, and who's going to be helping with the flighting of the presentation, is Mr. Tsepo Mohlomi. He's our acting SLM, and he's also joined by Zini, who would also help if there is anything that we need to do from a logistical perspective. So Tsepo, you can maybe just flight the presentation so that we can get started. Tsepo, we see your emails, not the presentation. There we go. All right, thank you. And thank you, Honourable Chair and members. Our presentation indeed is today for the local government audit outcomes and the concentration around the Western Cape audit outcomes. We've tagged our overall message around the audit outcomes for the province to be around firm leadership tone and a strong control environment, which is contributed to positive audit outcomes. So that's our tagline. But before I get into the details, Honorable Chair, if you would allow me, my presentation is almost split into two. The first portion is for me to be able to just take stock with the committee around our reputation promise, as well as our new organizational strategy. And I see this as an opportune moment for me to be able to then take you into my confidence around the strategy that we've put together for the next 7 years. It's been implemented from the 1st of April this year. And for me to just explain how we are going to go about executing that strategy through the objectives and how we would want to change the behavior of the public sector. And then the second bit is going to concentrate on the audit outcomes and with reference to the request for us to just concentrate on those performance of the Western Cape province. So Honorable Chair, if you allow me, our mission of our organization has not changed. The Auditor General of South Africa is here and we strive to live up to our reputation to strengthen our country's democracy by enabling oversight, accountability and governance in the public sector through auditing. And we want to do this so that we can build public confidence. At a basic level, our responsibility is to conduct an audit and then report on the municipality's financial performance, and their reported service delivery performance and whether they've actually complied with the relevant laws and regulations. So through these audits, we strengthen the accountability, transparency and integrity of the government. And we want to obviously demonstrate an ongoing relevance to the citizens by being a model organization. So this is done to enable a difference in the lives of the citizens by ensuring that the government is mostly doing good. And as a result, we will then be building public confidence. So, Honorable Chair, our vision is then to be recognized by all of our stakeholders as a relevant supreme audit institution that enhances public sector accountability. Through our organizational strategy review, we have not changed our mission. We have not changed our vision. Our mandate still stays tightly intact and based on the Constitution. Next slide, Seppo. So, honorable members, here is the accountability ecosystem. And before I show you the strategic objectives of the organization, the accountability ecosystem is pretty key in us being able to then shift that public sector culture. It refers to almost a network of stakeholders that have a mandate and a responsibility, so either legislatively or morally, to drive, to deepen, and also insist on the relevant public sector accountability. The mission of sustainably and efficiently shifting public sector culture through insight, influence, and enforcement is broad and cannot be achieved by the AGSA alone. So you'll see that on the one side, we've got the leadership and the decision makers, which is those officials right up to council and impact that we engage, as well as the mayor and the speaker. We engage when it comes to the individual municipalities, the municipal structures, and to be able to then have those conversations. But ultimately, there is also the support and intervention and the oversight, which the committee also falls part of one of the oversight structures, of working very closely with the coordinating ministries as well. And it's for us to be able to then help and drive that active citizenry. So the reason I'm concentrating on the accountability ecosystem is that we must ensure that through the value chain, we don't necessarily look at everything in isolation, and we then have the right conversations at the right level and ensure that we are connecting the dots from cycle to cycle, and that in fact people are fulfilling their mandates for the good of the citizens of the country. Seppo, you can go to the next slide.
Ms. Cullen, sorry if I
yes.
I'm so sorry to disturb you. The slide on the screen, it is can it be sort of enlarged a little, because I mean it is fairly small from my perspective. I don't know how other members may experience it.
Okay, so maybe you can make it full screen. If you go to view and opt for full screen. It's the third one from the bottom. It says full screen mode. There we go. Is that better, Chairperson?
Well, it's very similar to the previous. Maybe I don't know if you could possibly just enlarge it a little and then put it in full screen. I'm not so sure. But members, are you? That's so much better. Okay, can proceed, Ms. Cullen. Sorry for that. Okay, it's all good now.
Okay. No worries. Okay. As long as you can see it, that's fine. Okay, so honorable members, we've got our 2030 strategy on this slide, which is about us making a difference in the lives of the citizens. For us, it is obviously a reflection on the work that we've been doing up to now and whether it has made an impact on the lives of those in the country. So we have a strategic aspiration, and that strategic aspiration is to make a difference through the work that we do. On how the citizen then experiences, the citizen experiences the services that they are getting on the ground. We want to do that through a theory of change, and that is to shift the public sector culture. And how we're going to do that is to do it through insight, influence, and enforcement. So our first 3 strategic goals is then based on insight, influence, and enforcement. And I've touched on the accountability ecosystem. It is really truly for us to get the buy-in and interact with stakeholders to drive that level of accountability. Now, if each role player holds each other accountable by fulfilling their mandate, we should be able to see the change that we want to see. So if I can jump into the 6 strategic objectives, and those are the 6 blocks on the right-hand side. The first, as I mentioned, was the insights. Now, through the audit process, we will do levels of service delivery work and determine if auditees are in fact fulfilling their mandates. Examples of good behavior throughout the year and not necessarily at the end of the year would be somewhat what we are looking for. Our insights are not punitive and is to give direction to government as to where they need to concentrate to have an impact. Again, I wanted to mention it's non-punitive in nature when it comes to the insight perspective. We will still continue our audit process, and our audit process will result in an audit report, but part of that would be the level of insight so that we can influence the right type of behavior. And that brings in the next bit about the influence. So we could use those insights to have meaningful and transparent engagements. And then through those engagements, we hope to influence the type of behavior. Enforcement is the third one. This is through the powers that we've gotten in the PAA amendments to assist in recovering the resources the state and the taxpayers have lost. And this is also through the consequence management and elevating the aspects around consequence management. We want to do this through shifting behaviors in the public sector. So now the culture is really built around the type of behavior, but we want to do this through transparency, integrity, and accountability. Ultimately, we want to do this sustainably to ensure that our audit product is offered as sustainably as possible, so we can have we can have the impact that we intend to have. And then efficiently from our side as well to unlock existing resources to efficiencies. This is where we are looking for technological advancements so that we can then catapult how we offer the audit product much more efficiently. Honorable Chair, on the next slide is somewhat a map as to where we will want to see the public sector culture shift by the time we get to 2030. And again, it's tagging the fact that we want to do this sustainably, efficiently, through the insights and influence and enforcement. We've pegged the blue dots are the auditees. The scale of whether the dot is at the bottom or the top is basically based on audit outcomes. The audit outcome on the top would be obviously what we would predominantly know as a clean audit, unqualified with no findings. And what we want to concentrate on is the categories that we've created at the bottom, which is driven by culture. So doing harm, doing nothing, which is a poor culture, doing the basics, doing no harm and doing good would be an improved culture of transparency, integrity and accountability. So if I'd like to maybe just give an example of one, doing the basics would be that we would find good record keeping. We would find quality financial reports, both for and performance reports, that these are submitted on time, and that when we do also request for information, it's readily available and it is submitted on time. And this is where we, the bit around that processes and systems function throughout the year and not necessarily when we have to conduct our audit. For example, for doing no harm is where we find an environment doesn't have any irregular expenditure, any fruitless and wasteful expenditure, that the audits are done on a timely manner. There's positive, response to our engagements as an audit team as well. So that in a nutshell is the culture shift strategy, Honorable Chair and members. So I thought it would be good for us to then be able to delve into then the audit outcomes. We've done a little bit of service delivery work, which I'm going to concentrate on as well, so that members can see how our service delivery work is actually going to look, and that you'd be able to then anticipate or perhaps envisage a level of service delivery feedback from us in the future. So Tsepo, you can jump into then my second bit around the audit outcomes. So honorable members, we've got an improvement in the audit outcomes over the administration term for the Western Cape province. You will see that we've got good audit outcomes on this map that's being displayed around the West Coast, Overberg and Cape Winelands area. And this is due to us, those municipalities having a firm leadership tone, a strong control environment, and at least a competent workforce. I would, to some extent, we see that it is because of the vicinity to the metro, and that the skills then at least are sustainable, and the processes are sustainable, and as mentioned, that the control environment is strong. You would then see that in the Central Karoo and Garden route, they haven't managed to maintain they haven't managed to improve their audit outcomes, apart from the one auditee that has come out of a disclaimer and has moved into a qualification. Now, we attribute this to a defective control environment. So to unpack it, it's that we don't find implemented and sustainable systems in those environments that allow for good financial and performance reporting. And we attribute this to the lack of skills in the key disciplines. It could be for one or two reasons. The one bit would be around these areas are very outlying, and that people don't necessarily, who are skilled, don't necessarily want to stay in that area. So you also find that there are people quite often that are acting and then do not stay and become permanent. And there's a level of political instability that also contributes to this. But from an overall perspective, the audit outcomes show good for processes for financial and performance reporting. There are pockets of improvements that we saw in the environment, but I must note, Chairperson, that some of the information that we're going to be giving is obviously excluding those auditees that are somewhat struggling. So if I could just maybe go to compliance as an area. So for instance, we can start with the compliance issues. There are of two types of compliance issues that the municipalities struggle with. The one is supply chain management related, and the other one is around prevention of irregular expenditure. So we found those two within the environment. Then we must take cognizance of the fact that you've got to have a fair and transparent process in place. These are the checks and balances to ensure that you can, in fact, detect non-compliances before they occur. I think there's a level of maturity that needs to come through in the environment for us to even see a further improvement around those types of non-compliances. If I can maybe just briefly touch on irregular expenditure. We saw irregular expenditure decrease in this year. It was around 1.23 billion. But of that, the metro contributed about 760 million. So I think majority of that was sitting with the metro. Around those auditees that did not necessarily do very well, the contributing factors, as I mentioned, was the geographical location being an impediment to attract and retain the suitably skilled staff. There was political and administrative instability. So these contributing factors also resulted in late submission of financial statements by Beaufort West, Cunnaland and Laingsburg, and subsequent late finalization of the audits. And you'll see that they've missed the GR cutoff date. So in the general report, they are not included, but we do bring the outcomes to you today. These municipalities did receive a qualified opinion. So coordinating ministries play a very critical and important role, and we understand that the assistance of Provincial Treasury and the Department of Local Government was actually rejected at Cunnaland through legal mechanisms. However, an opportunity is available to influence the new administration culture in these municipalities, and then again towards ensuring that we establish a strong control environment and a service delivery is prioritized. For the Metro, Bito, Knysna, Oudtshoorn, and Prince Albert, they didn't get a clean audit outcome. In addition to submitting the financial statements late, the Prince Albert municipality required material corrections to obtain an unqualified audit opinion. Bito municipality was the only municipality to have material findings on their performance report as a result of their report information not being valid. As I've mentioned, Honorable Chair, compliance is an area that needs to be closely watched and tightened in terms of that supply chain and prevention of irregular expenditure. We do see a level of improvement, but it comes with a level of sustainability, which is quite key and necessary in the environment. So, Honorable Chair, if I could then move on to the service delivery outlook. The work that we've done around water and sanitation. Seppo, maybe the next slide. These are the insights that we gained around that. We looked at concentrated on delivery of shared water and sanitation services to the residents of informal settlements. And we looked at 3 areas. You'll see on the left-hand side, we looked at planning and needs assessment. We looked at the achievement of the targets that are sitting in the performance reporting. And we looked at the infrastructure and services around water and sanitation. Our first observation was that the municipalities were did not know how many households lived in informal settlements. But we see this as an opportunity for performance of regular surveys to determine the number of households and to maintain accurate information. And we are cognizant of the fact that there is a lot of effort in this to try to get these numbers pegged down. Achievement of targets, we saw that municipalities are not necessarily achieving the targets that they set for themselves. And the opportunity we see here is that implementation plans, budgets, and annual targets should enable the achievement of water and sanitation targets in a time frame that's determined to be reasonable by the municipalities. I think the key message that comes out from this one is around that we should be able to set ourselves attainable targets aligned to what the budget and the plans are. And if we do then see that the annual targets are not necessarily aligned to that need on the ground, we do need to ensure that we understand why. Then water and sanitation infrastructure and services. We saw poor installation and maintenance of water tanks, standpipes, and chemical and container toilets. I think the opportunity is to improve contract management, implementation, or improve the complaints reporting system, and also to embark on roadshows to improve the consumer education and awareness. So from our side, the water and sanitation service delivery testing really showed areas of improvement that's needed. We did this at a handful of auditees. We did it at a metro and 2 other municipalities. But I think it's a really good insight so that the government can see where they ought to concentrate on. Seppo, next slide. So, honorable members, I'll just then take stock just of our material irregularity implementation process. If members are aware that we implemented up to 7 auditees in this last cycle. It was implemented at the Metro, George, Beaufort West, Stellenbosch, Cederberg, Drakenstein, and the Garden route. We've got at this point in time at the reporting GR cutoff point in time 2 MIs in place, and it was around the payment for goods or services not received or not in line with the contract that has that was signed. We just wanted to highlight the responsibilities of the mayor and the council is to then monitor the progress and support the in addressing the material irregularity and improving controls, that the council monitors this progress and also calls on the to account for the actions taken and the outcomes from there. And just to note that irregular expenditure is a key driver for MIS, and that mayors and council, our recommendations were that mayors and council monitor the actions implemented by these MMs to reduce the recurrence of irregular expenditure. And I think I've touched a little bit on the levels of irregular expenditure have slightly improved. Tsepo, you can go to the next slide. So the commitments that we got when we did our roadshows and we engaged all the stakeholders was important because, again, it's around that discussions and having the right conversations through the accountability ecosystem. So at the municipal manager and the mayor level, we got a feedback around their commitment to fulfill their role to assist local government in becoming capable, efficient, ethical, and service delivery orientated to enable municipalities to move to that good state, and around effective and ethical leadership so that you can then see that positive impact on the lives of the citizens. From council perspective, it was just to ensure that they hold the executive and administration accountable, specifically around having credible financial and performance reporting, and that they ensure they prioritize and target, and the targets, priorities and the targets of the municipalities are reflective of the need of the communities that they serve. Coordinating ministries or institutions play a very important role. We took stock with Provincial Treasury, COCTA, and the offices of the Premier around intensifying some of the initiatives that they've got currently in place, but specifically to ensure that they collaborate on the strategic initiative to address skills shortage. There are other initiatives that are in place, like the municipal governance review and outlook, as well as the technical integrated municipal engagements, and to continue with those, and then to also strengthen the partnerships in terms of the accountability ecosystem so that the lives of the citizens are improved. From a standing committee on local government perspective, I guess the recommendation from our side as an audit office is to provide the necessary oversight to these role players and that will enable them to then fulfill their responsibility. And I think this engagement is one of those for you to be able to get the necessary insights from us. Honorable Chair, my last slide then covers just the general report, as you mentioned, Chair, that it was tabled. It was tabled on the 15th of June by the Auditor General. We've got our theme around capable leadership to demonstrate change through strengthening transparency and accountability. We've got an interactive website, and I know there was the website was offline for a period of time. We've managed to sort out the technological challenges that we faced, and that website has gone live, I think, last week sometime. So the website is quite good to navigate through. It allows you to go into the country perspective, select the province. From the province, it allows you to go into the district. You can see a district view, so you can see a province view, a district view, as well as the individual municipalities. What we've done is we've also linked information from Stats SA as well as National Treasury to give an indication around the population, as well as some key indicators that municipalities serve their community, so that all of that outcomes can be just read in perspective. It's pretty much our way of contributing for us to have open and transparent communication with the public at large. And last point, Honorable Chair, I want to make was around the preventative control guide that's available on our website. It is quite informative. I mentioned maturity of control environments, and specifically around those maturity coming from those preventative controls rather than detective controls. And I think the province is pretty much on a good foundation for us to really move into a preventative control space when it comes to compliances and financial reporting. So, Honorable Chair, that's our presentation from our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Callan, for taking us through the presentation. I do acknowledge your non-acting position, and I do apologize for having that incorrect at the start of the meeting. That is how it was communicated to me, but thank you for the correction. So colleagues, that's a high-level overview of the audit outcomes in the province. I'm going to open up the meeting for any questions that you may wish to pose for clarity purposes. And before we do that, I welcome Honourable Cameron Dugmore, who has joined the meeting late. I also noticed there's just a Cameron that's a guest, and I would suspect that it might be Honourable Dugmore. Is that correct?
Yes, it's Chairperson. It's definitely not Ian Cameron. It's Cameron Dugmore.
Thank you, Mr. Honourable Dugmore. I recognise you. If you wish to, pose a question or pass a comment on the presentation, you could do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I think Honourable Makamba Boja also is here. I'm sorry to just interject.
Okay, similarly, I welcome Honourable Makamba Boicha, also joined the meeting late. Thank you, Ms. Lodi for Seku for alerting me to that. Thank you so much. In the following order, we'll recognize Honourable Dugmore and then Honourable van der Westhuizen, and we'll take it from there. Honourable Dugmore, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much to the AG's office for the presentation. I would just like to ask a few questions. We are aware that the legislation guiding the Auditor General has been amended to enable the Auditor General's office to actually make recommendations in regard to further investigation of charges against officials who are alleged to have been guilty of maladministration and so on. I just want to ask, in all of these reports, has the Auditor General in the Western Cape made any proposals around disciplinary processes or criminal charges against any official? We've noticed that there are some municipalities which are rated quite low, and there are also other municipalities who appear to be doing well. But my question is, has the Auditor General made use of those amendments to recommend specific charges, administrative or criminal, against any local government official? That's the first question. Secondly, is the Auditor General able to comment on the role of the municipal public accounts committees, and whether, in the view of the Auditor General, those committees are functional and that they are actually assisting in regard to, following up on various issues that have been raised by the Auditor General? And linked to that, does the Auditor General's office have a view as to whether the chairperson of that committee, the MPAC committee, should be from an opposition party? Because we have a situation in our province, for instance, in the Bergrivier municipality, which is DA run, where the chair of the Public Accounts Committee comes from the DA, whereas there are other opposition parties in those municipalities. And then I would just like to ask, what was the total cost that the various municipalities paid the Auditor General to conduct these audits, and when will the municipalities themselves discuss this, the Auditor General's report for each municipality? When do those meetings start? Those are my questions for now, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Dagmo. I'm going to take a round of questions, and then Ms. Cullen can then direct the various officials to respond to those questions afterwards. So I'm recognizing Honourable van der Westhuizen and thereafter Honourable Maseko. Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation, but also particularly for the hard work behind this. And I do know that these results would not have been possible if it wasn't for guidance, and particularly since our oversight is in the first instance over our provincial departments. I really want to thank the Western Cape Provincial Department of Local Government for the support that they've given to many of our municipalities, particularly our rural municipalities. Chair, it's my impression that many of our rural municipalities, because they are by definition smaller, they are graded lower, they are limited in terms of regulations, in terms of the remuneration that they can offer to senior staff members, and that they struggle to attract the necessary talent and skills to those entities. And therefore, I think the support from the provincial department is highly appreciated, and we also do see that in the improved results. So I want to really appreciate the progress that have been made in this regard. My question is just, there are certain factors that the department can assist with, and there are certain factors that are beyond their means. The whole issue of, for example, instability in some of our councils, and we've recently again seen some instability in councils. Obviously, that is something that is beyond their reach. But there are other aspects, such as, for example, where they've sent senior officials to go and assist with items such as financial recovery plans, which I presume also include guidance in terms of, good audit practices, etc. From the Auditor General's report, would they be able to indicate how effective those provincial interventions have been? That's my first question. The second one is, do they have alternate means by which we can support or allow those municipalities to attract the necessary expertise and skills in order for them also to bring their accounting standards on par? And then lastly, Chair, can we perhaps then just ask, many of our senior officials, particularly municipal managers, have indicated that, they require substantial remuneration, because in terms of the current legislation, they can be held responsible in their, personally. And this links on to Honourable Dagmo's question then. To what extent have the auditors engaged with some of our municipal managers and indicated to them that there are some risks in terms of certain conduct that may lead to qualified audit opinions? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. I recognize Honourable Maseko, and thereafter Honourable Makamba Boita, and then we can have a response from the AG's office. Honourable Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I just want to find out, and I think from my side, I do have, or some of us, we did have a luxury of interacting with the AG also in the scope and a little bit of understanding of what are the challenges, and especially when coming to the consequence management, that it is a process that takes quite some time. But the question for me, it will be to the AG. And now, when coming to the system that for a financial year, there is consequence management that has to be implemented. And an official that has to implement, which is an accounting officer, let's say it's an MM, doesn't implement what the AG has suggested that would be towards helping a municipality. What is there for that empowers the AG to try to change the situation within that municipalities, or there's nothing that empowers the AG? And I'm not talking about, I think I'm before the last step that will be of the law enforcement. Is there a system in place that can, because I tend to believe that maybe sometimes you'll find that you get a scenario where also the accounting officer also have difficulty in being the challenge of a capacity or getting information or whatever the reason that may be. I'm just trying to find out mitigating factors in implementing whatever that the AG say has to be implemented and within a certain period of time towards the next financial year. Because sometimes you look at a municipality that gets irregular expenditures, not that it's not irregular expenditures, the wasteful expenditure again and again. And it seems like the consequence management can be something that is on the book, it ticks the box, but to what an extent the consequence management can empower the AG for that not to happen again. That's a question that maybe for the next step that we have to find out in those scenarios. How does the AG contribute to make sure that that can also be implemented effectively for the sake of the communities that falls within that municipality? And again, how does if it's a local municipality, how does the AG also communicate with the Provincial Department of Local Government in giving the support to that municipality when coming to specific, and I'm not talking about when it has to be under administration, maybe if there is a challenge with the capacity with that municipality. I mean, in the support that the provincial government can give to that municipality in the build-up to implementing that consequence management that maybe the AG can suggest to the municipality. I think, Chair, that will be all from me.
Thank you, Honourable Maseku. Honourable Makamba Boita, I recognize you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning to the meeting. My question, I'm partly covered by the last speaker, but I just want to ask the AG's office because I don't think it's the first time where they've experienced a case whereby there's municipalities who are not compliant or who have not passed the audit. So I want them to share with us in terms of the consequence management system that they've put in place in those specific municipalities. What has been the impact in terms of whether the consequence management system is effective or is it really working or not? Because I don't think it's the first time they've gone through that process of identifying municipalities that are not really towing the line. So I want them to share with us if there's any of that has happened in the past and if it has worked in terms of those municipality managers getting into implement those recommendations. And I want to also know their exact role in terms of enforcing or making sure that those municipalities, with whatever recommendations that they've made, if they really do comply, and what were the outcomes, or what is the outcome in terms of whether it has been effective or not. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Makamba Boita. Could I ask those members who still have their hands raised, could you lower it? I will offer a second round of questions or follow-ups of clarity, whatever new questions. Then I would know that when you raise your hand, it is in relation to a call for follow-ups. Honourable Maseko, Honourable Dagmo, could you just lower your hands, please? Thank you. Ms. Cullen, I hope you have captured all the questions from the members. I'm handing over to you, and you can direct the responses as you see fit amongst your team. Thank you, ma'am. You may proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Yes, I've captured quite a few of the questions. I think I'll attempt to answer some of them, and maybe just ask support from my team around the role of AMPAC. Maybe Ashley, if you could maybe just help me augment that one, and maybe if Thomas can just help me augment the total cost of the AG, and then we'll see where I've somewhat not been able to answer, that the team can then support me or augment my answer, right? So from the questions around Honourable Dagmo, around the recommendations that we've made and the disciplinary processes made, indeed, when we see, and maybe let me cover the material irregularity process holistically. I think a lot of the members asked around that question. The first step, obviously, we've got to concentrate on is that there's a set of mandated, as I indicated, legislated roles and responsibilities that are taken for those officials that are sitting in the accountability ecosystem, both from a leadership perspective as well as from a oversight perspective. So the first true core would be to be able to say that we need to activate the actions and the mandates of those structures to be able to then concentrate on whether there is a consequence management that's required in a space, or the fact that we've given the recommendations and those recommendations are in fact implemented. So from where we are at this point in time, it is going to be important that we do have the necessary conversations. And I think there was a question as well around whether we do take this information to impact, whether we do take this information to the MMs, those structures, are they functioning adequately? As part of the audit process, when we do identify matters, both from a control deficiency perspective as well as an item that's going to be impacting the audit outcome, there's a vigorous communication process that is run up to the MM level. And once we are done with the process, it does get tabled at the council and at MPAC. The insights that we give from that perspective is the fact that where have we found weaknesses or deficiencies in the environment, and we talk about it in those three areas of financial reporting, performance reporting, as well as compliance. We attempt to then ensure that we engage adequately with the MM to identify the root causes. So what is the reason that this has occurred? So is it a leadership tone? Is it something around that oversight, perhaps driving the right level of behavior and culture? Secondly, is it a process issue? So is it an implemented process for which it is not necessarily functioning? Or for example, is it something that does not have an implemented process? So we look at the systems and the processes around it. And then lastly, we look at the governance structure. So the role of what internal audit plays, the role of the audit committee plays, and somewhat the entire environment. Now, we would ensure that once those conversations are done, everyone in that accountability ecosystem has adequate understanding of what sort of change is required in the environment, or if change needs to be crafted, that they directly address the root cause, so that you can at least achieve a sustainable solution and not just putting a bandage on the issue. So I think from that perspective, it's important. If I concentrate on what has been done in terms of the recommendations, I did take stock of the material irregularities. So that's the second bit that I wanted to touch on. The Western Cape Provincial Government at this point in time of reporting of the GR had 2 MIs issued, and this is to the city of Cape Town. The MIs need to meet a specific definition. So in terms of the new act, yes, we do have some responsibilities where we report. So an MI is reported where you've got any non-compliance with or contravention of a legislation. It could be a fraud, theft, or a breach of a fiduciary duty. But in the year that we were looking at, we were phasing in the MI process. So we were only concentrating on non-compliance. And this sort of non-compliance needed to have been identified through the audit process, and it must have resulted in either material financial loss, a misuse or loss of a material public resource, or substantial harm to the public sector institution or the general public. So at that point in time, we've adopted a phased in. We were implementing non-compliances that had resulted in a material financial loss, and we had issued a MI. The material irregularity process is such that we then, once we identify an MI, we raise it to the accounting officer. In municipal space, this is an MM, and that is formally issued to them in a form of a MI notification. And they, in that is a request to indicate that please follow up on these non-compliances that has resulted in a financial loss. And in there it says, if you could please implement some level of action, be it of a disciplinary investigative nature, to determine the reason why this has happened. And the second bit is around the recovery and stopping of the financial loss that has occurred. So it's almost the Auditor General's way of calling an accounting officer into action to say, please, can you enforce your mandate and your role and responsibility according to what the legislation says. If we find when we do come back that the MM has not conducted, so the MM is allowed to then respond to us to say, this is my plan. This is how I intend on addressing both the non-compliance, and this is how I intend on addressing the recovery of the financial loss and the stopping of the financial loss. When we do come back in the next cycle and we do then follow up on this MI, if we find that adequate action has been taken, then we are satisfied that the accounting officer has fulfilled his or her responsibility. If adequate action is not taken, then we then go into the recommendation phase, and that recommendation formally sets down to then hold the accounting officer to account for those recommendations. In the case of the Western Cape Provincial Government, Western Cape space and the metro that we issued the MIs to, we have not yet issued any recommendations. As for the outcomes that we're looking at this point in time, we are not sitting at that space. So we were at the point where we were comfortable with the action that was set down by the accounting officer, and we are in the process of evaluating the outcomes of that process. I'm going to then try to answer our honourable members' Van der Westhuizen's questions around the the comment made around the smaller municipalities. Indeed, I think we've pegged it on the skills shortage as well, and ability to attract that skilled resources, and it's aligned to what we've identified. From the provincial interventions perspective and the coordinating ministries, we do believe that the initiatives that are currently in place are fit for purpose. They are adequate. I think I don't want to answer on behalf of the coordinating ministries, but it would be good to see them continue with these initiatives. We do believe that it does, to some extent, cover the aspects that need to be covered, because we see that the audit outcomes, in fact, have been adequately sustained. for any recommendations around alternative means to attract and keep resources, I think this is the one where I would say perhaps it's going to be important that the coordinating ministries do engage honourable members on this to see whether they've actually looked at certain initiatives and perhaps brainstorm. So one of our recommendations was to come up with some level of strategic initiative collectively in the accountability ecosystem to address the skills shortage. And unfortunately, it is outside of our mandate to be able to just provide potential solutions to this, apart from the fact that we could perhaps say it is quite a critical initiative. The one around the conversations of the MMs for the municipalities that have not done well. Yes, we have engaged the MMs on the outcomes. So as I've indicated, we found that we were engaging with a few MMs. There were quite a few acting roles as well. So we do not know how sustainable or how sustainably our recommendations will be implemented if we are dealing with a number of acting individuals. I think I've touched on a bit of consequence management linked to our powers from Honourable Maseko's question, but it pretty much it does touch on our ability to be able to pick up a material irregularity and then calling on the accountability ecosystem. Once the outcomes are communicated to MPAC and Council, we do roadshows, including the Auditor General, who then meets with all key stakeholders, such as the Mayor, such as the Premier and the MECs for local government, finance, as well as the relevant HODs, to have the conversations around how the outlooks have come about. And I think that's where those commitments that I've set down have come out from. So I think it is important. So pretty much the question is, yes, we're empowered through the MI process, but it is really a call to action for those accounting officers to do what they are mandated to do. There was a question from Honourable Maseko linked to that around how do we communicate with the Department of Local Government. I think I've covered that in terms of the capacity, and the key conversation is around ensuring that there's a sustainable initiative around the skills shortage. Honourable Makamba's question around a consequence management system. Oh yes, whether it's effective and whether the MM has managed to implement. So where we see some of these municipalities not do well, you could see that they've not managed to improve their environment. And it is that key intervention that is required around stabilizing that environment, because I talked a lot about administrative instability being those various acting positions, the skills shortage as well. So again, we've got the MMs trying to and attempting to stabilize the environment. It's very tough to then implement the necessary consequence management. But rightly so, you would want to then ensure that there is the right behavior that is enforced in that environment. I think I've covered the question around the enforcement, because I think that MI space definitely has covered it. We have not identified at this point in time material irregularities in those spaces apart from what has been communicated. However, in this current cycle, we would be going into expanding of implementing our full definition of a material irregularity. And this is through our audit process. We will keep an efficient eye out so that we would be able to identify if there is that exists in this environment, we'll be able to identify them. Honourable Chair, that is from my side. If I could maybe then just hand over to Ashley around the role of the MPAC and then to Thomas around the costing and yeah, and I hope I've answered the questions around the engagement. Thanks, Chair. Ashley.
All good, Ms. Cullen. Thank you.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and members of the Standing Committee. Yes, Chair, to answer Honourable Dagmo's question around the Municipal Public Accounts Committees, That the Municipal Public Accounts Committee is a creature of statute, so it's a committee of the council, that is obviously established by the council. So I think the role of the Auditor General in determining the members would be interfering in the role of the council. So it's up to the councillors to decide, in terms of the process prescribed by legislation, as to who's going to be that members of that Municipal Public Accounts Committee, and then obviously for the members of those committees and council to determine how the makeup of that council should be. So from an Auditor General perspective, our role in terms of, we don't have a role basically in terms of determining how the makeup of that council should be, because that's a function of council. How the makeup of the Municipal Public Accounts Committee should be, because that's a function of council, and who should be chairperson, deputy chairperson, secretary, and so on that council. So that is basically a function of the council in terms of the Municipal Structures Act. So that's the view, chairperson. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the honourable members. Maybe to answer the question around the audit fees that was posed earlier by the honourable member, I think for me, we also need to understand that the audit fees are a function of quite a number of aspects, right? The first one being the minimum work that auditors need to do in an audit environment, and this is typically a work that is mandated by the auditing standards. This is typically work that is mandated by the legislation. So there is that demand that needs to be done by the auditors. But second to that, when the auditors also go into the audit environment, they have to identify, the amount and the level of risk that is sitting in the municipal environment space, to also determine the amount of effort that the auditors need to then, place on a specific audit environment. So I just wanted members to also be aware that our audit fees are driven by quite a number of aspects that we find in the auditing space, in the municipal space, specifically in this regard. And for that reason, in the last year, the budgeted audit fee for the municipalities in the Western Cape was about 136 million rand approximately. However, the actual audit fee approximated to around 139 million rand. And part of the reasons that are attributable to this difference between what we actually budgeted and what was actually billed at the end is because of the amount of effort that the auditors also put in with regards to resolving some of the issues that we find in the environment. And Sangita, in our presentation earlier, indicated that in the environment where you find that there are no preventative controls, then when the auditors come, they detect a lot of errors or some errors. And in that process, they have to spend a lot of time trying to correct those errors with management of those respective municipalities. And that therefore, costing the environment more money. So we should be, as this committee as well, assisting in ensuring that there are strengthened preventative controls in the respective municipalities, and this will have somewhat a correlation to the amount of audit fees that we do charge as well. So I just wanted to also indicate to you that you can assist in that process of audit fees. Thank you, and thank you, Sangita.
Thank you, Mr. Maboko.
Thank you, Chair.
Um,
Thank you, Chair.
You may, if there's anything else you'd like to say, Ms. Cullen, please, you may proceed. Or shall we take a round of follow-up questions? Okay, good. Thank you. I recognize Honourable Dugmore. I don't know, Honourable Dugmore, if you pose a follow-up question, please proceed.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair, and to the responses from the AG's office. I must raise a very serious concern, and possibly the Auditor General's office can indicate, the exact date in which the amendments were passed into law, because as has been said, the material irregularity has been defined as any non-compliance with or contravention of legislation, fraud, theft, or a breach of fiduciary duty identified during an audit performed under this Act that resulted in or is likely to result in a material financial loss, the misuse or loss of a material public resource, or substantial harm to a public sector institution of the general public. And then the amendments also specifically provide for a certificate of debt for failure to implement the remedial action. Now, what I would like to ask is, since this amendment came into effect, because we've just heard that no one, absolutely no one, has been identified to be reported at all. Out of all these audits, no one at all. So I would just like to ask, since the amendment came in, has anyone, any official of any municipality of the Western Cape been referred to an external agency for further follow-up, whether that is a public service commission, whether it is the Hawks, whoever it is, because I find it, almost unacceptable. There's been an outcry, from the public, from the members of parliament, around the fact that audits are completed, but there's absolutely no consequence management. So my follow-up question is to ask the Auditor General in the Western Cape to please indicate that since these amendments became law, has any official in the entire province or the local sphere which we're discussing here, been reported to an agency outside of the Auditor General's office, because that concerns me. I understand that in terms of my second question around the chairperson of MPAC, I hear the response, but I think the central failure of the issue of consequence management, yes, it is correct, Chair, that the MPAC is a creature of local government legislation. But if we set up a Chinese wall between what the Auditor General does and what the MPAC actually does, that further undermines any possibility of consequence management. So what we have is a situation where municipalities pay the Auditor General to do this work, and essentially there don't appear to be consequences at all, which I think is not necessarily the Auditor General's direct concern. I think that there is obviously the role of the municipality, the council itself, and the but I'm just worried that there just appears to be a potential for an unhealthy relationship, especially if we have a situation where absolutely no one is being recommended for disciplinary action to outside agencies. So the real issue that I want to ask, if since the amendment, has anyone been recommended for further action by an outside agency? Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Dugmore. Honourable van der Westhuizen, I recognise you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my question is slightly different from that of the Honourable Dugmore. Initially, the scope of the Auditor General was, and excuse my lay take on this, but my impression was it was with the compliance of, can we call it, financial regulations. Then the scope was slightly extended to also include an audit of the achievement of performance indicators, which seem to have caught a number of our entities, not only at local level, but also at provincial and national level, slightly off guard. And we found that quite a number of them complained about the AG raising the bar and, you know, them having regressed in terms of audit findings, whereas they felt that in terms of the initial criteria, you know, they were still on par with previous years and previous findings. So my question is, can we expect any new developments in the audit field, or the expectations or the criteria that would be audited by the Auditor General going forward? Or do you believe that you've now reached kind of the full scope of what you as auditors would like to assess when you look at the financial management of entities? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Any other members would like to ask any follow-up questions? If not, then I will ask the 2 or 3 questions that I'd like to ask before Ms. Cullen, you and your team can respond. So,
Chair, sorry, there's just a very last one, if you don't mind. I just wanted the Auditor General to, sorry, Chair, would you allow me just to ask? It's the last one.
Yes, please
if the Auditor General could just indicate to us, say, if we as public representatives doing our own oversight work in a certain municipality, say we come across or someone gives us documentation, because I obviously understand that the audit, you know, can never be comprehensive. You know, there's particular issues that are looked at, and I understand sometimes things might be missed. But what can a member say in our situation as MPLs, say if we discover we're given documentation about what appears to be a material breach? Is that something that we can submit to your office and ask for an investigation into that? That's just the issue that I'd like to clarify. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Dugmore. So my question is just relates to, you know, what was previously stated regarding the whole accountability ecosystem, and if there's a weak link within that sort of ecosystem, then certainly we will have the audit outcomes that we've experienced, particularly in the Central Karoo district. Now, in terms of the State of Municipalities report of the period under review, all of those matters that were highlighted by the Auditor General's office were sort of presented in that State of Municipality report, leadership, internal controls, and a lot. So nothing new is being said. Yeah, I want to support Honourable Dugmore's contention is that nothing's just little sort of accountability in terms of the municipalities. If we look at Beaufort West, for the past 3 financial years, they have adverse audit outcomes. We have councils that simply, in certain municipalities, who simply just willfully ignore the prescripts of the various legislations. And I know that the AG's office plays a great deal of emphasis on the accounting officer, but very often accounting officers are being put under severe pressure by councils to act in a very sort of suspicious manner that may not be compliant with legislation. So as much as we want to say that officials need to be held accountable for their actions, and to what extent are councillors be held vicariously liable for unlawful instructions that are being given to officials to carry out to advance a particular agenda in a particular council. And we know the dysfunctionality in Canaland for the past so many years, and that dysfunctionality is largely driven by dysfunctional councils, that councillors giving unlawful instructions to officials, dismantling pockets of accountability, and the manner in which these councils function seems to repel ethical, competent people to make themselves available to work in that environment. And often we say skill shortages because of the sort of where these municipalities are located. That may not be the true story. It's about the councils within those municipalities that makes it intolerable for people who have the requisite skills, who have the ethical and moral compass to do the right thing, to make themselves available within those sort of localities. And then furthermore, in terms of material irregularities, and I think much has been said about it, in terms of the tracking of where we are, and Ms. Cullen has stated quite correctly that there are 2 outstanding material irregularities, but it was also mentioned that at the start of the responses, that a number of municipalities were sort of identified for possible material irregularity investigations. And of those, given the fact that there are only 2 and they're located within the city of Cape Town, so there are no other outstanding material irregularities in any of the other municipalities in the Western Cape. And then lastly, Chair, in terms of the audit costs, it's a worrying concern that audit costs have escalated to an extent that it becomes impossible for municipalities to pay these costs. We are mindful that this particular audit has taken place during the pandemic, where physical interaction were not always possible, and many of these audit functions were possibly executed remotely and also using sort of technological instruments at the disposal of the office. But furthermore, Chair, if you look at the costs, and if you look at the general audit outcomes of the province, we have improved in terms of our audit outcomes, bar those 3 municipalities that were highlighted. So if we have a general improvement in terms of our clean audits, it follows that the whole notion of additional work that needs to be done in terms of the audit, it may, I don't know how to reconcile that a justification for the increase in audit cost. And then lastly, Chair, and I think that thing I wanted to mention, oh gosh, where's it now? Is that we will have a, sort of input from the department and Treasury in terms of what they will be doing in terms of assisting these municipalities in improving their outcomes, audit outcomes. But I also know that the department do have programs available to augment wherever there's a skills shortage, to assist those municipalities to plug the gap, albeit on a temporary basis, to achieve a particular outcome. I think I've said quite a bit. Ms. Cullen, I'm going to just hand over to you, and then you can just respond to that.
Okay. No, thank you, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members, for the follow-up questions. Let me answer the question around the MI space and just give clarification around that. So Honourable Dagmo is correct that we have not issued any referrals to any other bodies such as the Hawks or Public Protector for the Western Cape Province. We have implemented the amendments from the 1st of April 2019. And what we did was we did a phased-in approach where we then first prepared our regulations and thereafter implemented on a phased perspective. So the auditees or the municipalities that I mentioned that we've implemented that from the last cycle was those seven auditees. But yes, in fact, we've identified at the reporting of the GR, you'll see that will reflect on 2 MIs that have been issued to the city. Subsequently, we have issued additional MIs, but those are currently in the system. We do not, what we do is we do ensure that we close the loop in terms of potential non-compliances as well as irregular expenditure. And that is the important note I wanted to make, to say that not every irregular expenditure is going to result in a material irregularity being issued, but every irregular expenditure has a responsibility to be followed up and investigated and a necessary consequence management being taken. So we cannot say that blanket there has been no consequence management, disciplinary or necessary investigation that's been taken in the environment of the municipalities. But out of our material irregularity space, there hasn't been that level of recommendation or referral at this point in time. Yes, you would get so we are getting to full implementation of the full definition, as the Honourable Member recited the definition of the MI. It does talk to those aspects around fiduciary duty. It does talk to the aspects around public harm as well. And we will be getting to full implementation of that definition as we stand now. Our systems are in place for that. I wanted to also then answer Honourable van der Westhuizen's questions with that one around the scoping of the audit. So yes, the scoping of the audit in terms of the mandate allows us to report on financial reporting, so financial statements, the annual performance report, so the performance reporting in the environment, as well as the compliances with key legislation that we've scoped in. So from our perspective, the full material irregularity definition has been fully scoped in, so that should not change unless the definition is changed through legal processes, and then the 3 focus areas that we audit on. So this is where we are with that. I think there was a question around the oversight work. So through that you would do, and if you do pick up something, that whether you can raise it with us. Indeed, any matter that is brought to our attention or we've been given, and there's been a request for investigation, the AG's office can request. Can investigate, but we will evaluate whether the matter is not within the mandate of any other institution, such as your public protector and Hawks and SAPS even. And if it's within their mandate, we will then refer that matter to those organizations. If it is within our mandate, we will then scope it as a separate engagement. So it won't be done as part of our audit process. What we also do is we evaluate whether the matter that has been brought to our attention can be covered through the audit process. And our audit is risk-based, so any information that's brought to us at any point in time is evaluated, and even a risk is identified, and then we then do conduct specific work around that and can provide that necessary feedback on this. I wanted to mention, Honourable Chairperson, that obviously the Audit Office must definitely be seen as an independent assurance provider. And the value that we bring to the table around the assurance levels is of a reasonable in nature. And I think one of the honourable members said that, yes, we don't necessarily test everything, but we test from a risk perspective. And we have vigorous risk identification processes in the environment for us to be able to then tailor make our approach. So we do pick up areas where there has been some level of political influence, undue influence that has potentially impacted on the processes of financial reporting, performance reporting and compliance. The chances are that when we do pick it up, we do elevate it and report on it. I think I clarified the one about the MIs, and I mentioned the municipalities that I've mentioned is where we had done, we had scoped them in for the PAA implementation, but from this cycle onwards, we would be then scoping, from the next cycle onwards, we'll be then scoping the rest of the municipalities. And I think the important bit is around the messaging that we bring, how the information is necessarily digested by those in the accountability ecosystem. And you'll see that we've concentrated a lot around the accountability ecosystem, that we have the right conversations, we bring that insight in terms of the audit outcomes, and we do then ensure that we influence the key role players to take the necessary action that should be taken. And I want to link it back to the strategy, the organizational strategy that I presented around the lived realities of the citizens, to say that ultimately we do have a responsibility to the public at large, both from the municipality side as well as from our side, to be able to somewhat fulfill the need that's sitting on the ground. So from that side, I do want us to say that, or end off with saying that we are here to be able to provide you with the necessary information that those role players in the environment who've been mandated through legislation to be able to then take that information, digest it, determine what would be the correct course and way forward, and then implement that for the betterment of the citizens in the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Cullen. Colleagues, any other comments or follow-up and responses you'd like to make? I see no hands. Going once, going twice. Just, I think, Ms. Cullen, I don't know if it is within your purview to have the response to a particular question that I've raised, and that is there perhaps in your view, I don't know, a deficiency in legislation that separate, although councillors and council is within the accountability ecosystem, that somehow councillors and councils, when they engage and take decisions that is contrary to legislation, that in a way that there is little responsibility that they take in terms of those decisions, and all the responsibilities is transferred to the accounting officer. And my question at the time was, in your view, is there perhaps, and if you don't have an opinion, I'll accept that, there may be a sort of a deficiency in legislation to hold councillors vicariously liable for unlawful decisions that council takes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for that question. But I must, yes, indicate that we do conduct our work according to what's within the legislation. If there is a view to indicate that the legislation is not robust enough to hold those accountable, it is probably outside of the scoping of what we would be testing or what we'll be bringing to the table. From our perspective, we look at legislation and we determine whether legislation has processes in place to be implemented so that it can be achieved. So I think from my side, as I indicated, we do identify if there's a risk in terms of a process that's been followed, and whether that risk has materialized. And if that risk has materialized, we do elevate that in terms of our auditor's report. And the detail of all of that is given. So we believe from our side as an audit office, we give the MMs sufficient detail and the necessary detail to allow for some level of action to be taken. And that's where I believe our communication strategy as well with these MMs as well as council and impact is quite robust, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cullen. I think it's a conversation that you'll have to, take forward with other stakeholders, and then possibly we will not find sort of unanimity around it, but certainly it is a conversation that we need to be have with regard to sort of tightening the accountability sort of ecosystem that you so aptly refer to. So, colleagues, in the absence of any further questions from members, allow me the pleasure to express my sincere gratitude for the work that is being performed by the AG's office. I may also add, in terms of legislation, it's a Chapter 9 institution, and in terms of its mandate, it's specifically defined in legislation, but it also operates on a very sort of non-competitive, so to speak, sort of environment whereby it is the only body that can conduct the audits for municipalities and other state entities and other state departments. So municipalities are simply just price takers, and that is something that in a normal competitive environment that it is expected that many municipalities and state-owned entities need to comply with, is not always sort of in this context being applied. Be that as it may, just in conclusion, and perhaps just something that it's a miss that I didn't ask, and just a quick response, Ms. Cullen, is that during the course of the conducting of your audits in various municipalities, did you perhaps experience any intimidation? Your office experience any intimidation or threats to the safety of your teams in the various municipalities in the Western Cape? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we've experienced it in the cycle. Ashley can maybe just confirm for me, but as far as I'm aware, we haven't experienced anything in the cycle. Ashley, just confirmation.
Yes, thank you, Sangeeta. Chairperson, Honourable Chair, no, we haven't experienced any threats or intimidation at any of the municipalities within the Western Cape. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
So much, Ms. Callan and Mr. Orcus. It is pleasing to note that you're able to conduct your work in a intimidation-free environment, and that will contribute to the credibility of the reports that you provide to us and to the various stakeholders. Having said that, Ms. Cullen and your team, we are very mindful of, and as my colleague Honourable van der Westhuizen stated, that the huge responsibility that is placed on your shoulders in terms of ensuring that there's accountability within our municipalities, and that our municipalities are within the defined environment, are able to provide the services to our various communities that they expect of those municipalities. And we are very mindful of certain pockets of underperformance in the province, and we know that from Provincial Treasury and the Department of Local Government that there is sort of a sensitivity in terms of what needs to be done in those municipalities that is underperforming. And here I refer to Laingsburg, Beaufort West and Kanaland in particular. And it is pleasing to have witnessed how Bito has also moved into a better audit environment in terms of their internal controls and their compliance matters. So we hope that in the next cycle we will have in those municipalities that are being sort of at risk for adverse opinions, that we will have improved audit outcomes in that environment as well. So from the committee's perspective, we wish to continue with this engagement, and I think your office has been sort of very cooperative with the committee in the past, and nothing has changed to that effect. And we hope that wherever you could be of assistance to us, so we could be of assistance to you, that we should call upon each other to ensure that, because we have a singular sort of objective in the sense that we want our municipalities to have an environment in which they could possibly render the much needed services to our community. So with that said, Ms. Cullen and your team, have a lovely day ahead, and we will keep the channels of communication open so that we could strengthen each other's mandate in terms of our different roles. Thank you so much, and I don't know if you anything you'd like to say in conclusion. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and for the opportunity. We really do appreciate the time that the committee has taken to engage with us on this on these audit outcomes, and we definitely are here to assist if there's anything that's required. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cullen and your team. So the committee will stay behind because there are some internal matters that we'd like to deal with. I will allow the Office of the AG's personnel to exit the meeting, the department, as well as Provincial Treasury, as well as my sincere thanks to Salga and its representatives for being present in the meeting. And I'm sure Salga will assist us in ensuring that our municipalities are in strict compliance with the legislation and execution of the mandate. So we will extend an invitation to Salga also to brief the committee in terms of what they are doing in terms of assisting municipalities in improving the audit outcomes. With that said, I'm going to adjourn for 5 minutes so that our invited guests and presenters are given an opportunity to exit the meeting. And members, we will reconvene at 10 to 11 to deal with internal committee business. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, guests. The meeting is adjourned for 5 minutes. Thank you. Johan, are we good to go?
Dis reg so Chairperson, we can go.
Okay, all colleagues present? Okay, Johan,
Present.
thank you. Thank you so much. So, Johan, the next item on the agenda is the minutes of the 10th of May 2020 and the 13th of June 2022, right? Those two sets of minutes. And then we have the quarterly report from April to June 2022. And then we have report on the oversight visit to the Western Cape District Municipal Council. I don't know if I think that is it. And then we have the business plan and program for 2022 and 23 financial year, and then possible resolutions. So what we're going to do, Jan, before we consider these reports, because the briefing of the AG's office is still fresh in our mind, that we will deal with the resolutions first, and thereafter we will then adopt these minutes and these various reports. If I have the agreement of the members, then we can proceed in that way. Do I have the acquiescence of the members present? We deal with resolutions first?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, good. So with that said, colleagues, any resolutions in particular that you'd like to propose? I see Honourable Makamba Boita. I recognize him, member.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I think on the report that we received from the AG, particularly on the issue of compliance and all of that, and the recommendation that they make to municipalities that are not performing, is it possible for us to have those municipalities in a meeting so that they can share with us what were the recommendations, and also to provide us with the progress report in terms of what is the process in terms of whether they've implemented those recommendations or not, and whether there are any improvements as such. So that's my submission, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Makamba Boita. Just for clarity purposes, which municipalities are you referring to? In particular,
I'm particularly referring to the municipalities which were not compliant in terms of the audit report.
So
that were mentioned on the presentation. I think Santonco is one of them. I'm not sure which other municipalities, because I came late in the meeting. So I'm actually referring to the municipalities that did not meet the audit requirements, or they did not pass the audit.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We will do, that's the one resolution. Any other resolutions, colleagues? Honourable Maseku.
Thank you very much. I don't know, Chair, in relation to what Member Makamba Boja is saying. I don't know if it's going to be a replication of, I'm in Scopa, you are in Scopa, that it definitely is going to be one of the engagement is going to say we have to engage. So is it going to double dose, or how are we going to go about? I don't know, but I'll take a cue from also Johan to say how can we deal with that for that engagement, so that it doesn't duplicate and irritate the municipalities as we try to engage with them. And then maybe one from me is, Chair, just in being proactive about the before the audit outcomes. I don't know how to put it, but I wish if we can have an engagement with SAGA for the decision making when coming to the council, the impact of decisions that are made within the council chambers? How can we sort of exchange ideas for the betterment of decision making in the, I don't know how to put it, but it's more of holding the accounting officers accountable within that as they take the decisions within the chambers. I wonder if you do understand me, but it's being proactive in how to mitigate and also how to hold accounting officers or the directors accountable with those IDP plans that they see that there's nothing untowards. Because at the end of the day, we need as public reps to say that those ideas that we sell to the communities that we say have to be implemented is the officials that have to implement them. But the system of how do we hold them accountable, I think in the municipalities sometimes they forget that it's what is being done in municipalities by the officials is what is the decision that they took within the chambers. So how do we engage so that we have that bond and that relationship of saying, in the province, this is what we do and how we go about to check as we go for an oversight. In fact, you can also do it this way. You know, the peer relationship of us and them doing what we do as we do an oversight and them also doing the oversight. I don't know how to put it, but maybe you can help me and Johan can help me if you understand what I'm trying to say. In being proactive, what is it that we can do? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Maseko. I think I have an idea as to what you were stating. I alluded to that as well early on. We do have a slot that we're going to invite the department as well as Provincial Treasury to brief the committee in terms of their sort of measures that they have they're putting in place to deal with the audit outcomes. So I don't know also that we invite SAGA also to that same meeting, also to share with us as to what they do to address the concern that you've raised, Honourable Maseko. Johan, I see your hand. Will you just come in here quickly to assist quickly?
Yes, Chairperson. No, I was going to just raise it that we will have a session with the department as well as Provincial Treasury on these audit outcomes. I will then extend the invitation to SAGA as well to address it, and then just to highlight to the members regarding the standing committee's oversight role over municipalities. Before we maybe start calling individual municipalities in, that we first see what the department and Provincial Treasury is doing, and then perhaps that as a further step if there is need for that. I will liaise with you again, Chairperson, just on the issue that Mrs. Maseko has raised, just to get the wording right.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Johan. I recognize Honourable Dugmore. Honourable Dugmore, you have a specific resolution or two that you'd like to share with the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. I would like to ask to propose that the committee be provided with a breakdown by the Office of the Auditor General of the, I think he mentioned an amount of 139 million. If that could be broken down as to how much each municipality paid, that's the one thing. And the second thing is, I'm not sure whether other committee members agree and if that point has been raised before, because I had to take an urgent call. But I don't know what the other members feel, but I'm concerned that the fact that even though Parliament went through the process of strengthening the powers of the Auditor General that, as you heard, since 1st of April 2019, there hasn't been a single official. Now, I mean, you refer, Chair, to Beaufort West. I can also refer to Kanland. I can refer to other municipalities. It just seems, it really boggles the mind that absolutely no one. So I don't know. I think the committee should express a concern at the implementation of the amendments, in particular around the definition of a material infringement. But I think we need to be firm on that. But as Johannes now said, I think when we have the department and Salga, you know, we can also raise that further. But I mean, I would like to use the word unacceptable, but maybe if other committee members just want to say we raise a concern, but I'm very concerned about that.
Thank you, Honourable Dagmo. I share your concern, and I think that when we engage with the Department and Treasury, we can at that stage also, in a more vociferous way, express our displeasure that very little consequence management has been sort of meted out to those municipalities and officials that have flagrantly flouted the law. So yes, I do share your sentiments, because the AG's office since 2019 have been pussyfooting around the implementation of this material irregularity, extra powers that the legislation provided them. And like in a phased process, they've implemented the full definition, as you have correctly also shared with the committee earlier, of what a material irregularity in terms of the legislation ought to cover. But then again, thank you for that resolution. I also was going to raise the breakdown of the various audit costs per municipality, because frankly speaking, it is becoming unaffordable for municipalities to have this. The AG's office is a monopoly in terms of rendering the service. Municipalities are price takers, and we need to monitor the rising costs over the years. We need to watch it very keenly so that it doesn't become totally unaffordable to municipalities. Any other resolution, colleagues, that you'd like to pose? Honourable van der Westhuizen, I recognise you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Latching on to your concerns about the rising costs, and I share those concerns, would it be possible to perhaps ask for a sample of some municipalities how the costs from the AG's office has increased over the last 5 years, and then compare that with, let's call, general wage increases or inflation rate, just to see whether this notion that we have that the costs are rising faster than, you know, the general cost of living, that there is some truth in that. Now, my first intention would be to say, can we get the cost of all Western Cape municipalities pulled together? But if that's not possible, can we then perhaps have a representative sample of some of our local governments? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable, for the conversation. To agree with you, and I think that it is possible that in tabular form they can give us the costs of each municipality in the Western Cape. There are 30, so that ought not to be too difficult to extract on a spreadsheet and make it available, as Honourable Dagmo has requested us to do. So we will do that. Thank you. Any other resolutions, colleagues? Right, thank you. In the absence of any, Johan,
would a period of 3 financial years, will that be suffice for the committee to see the audit cost? 3 years?
Yeah, I think that's since the beginning of this.
My proposal was for, you know, can we have the figures 5 years ago and then the current figures? I think that would give an even better indication.
Okay, so you don't necessarily want it for each of the 5 years. You just want 5 years ago and then this year ago, Mr. van der Westhuizen.
That's my proposal, but it's open.
Thank
for
you so
debate.
much. I'll do it like that. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. I would suggest that we have the costs for each year per municipality. I mean, they should have it. It is not that they're going to spend an inordinate amount of time getting those figures. They should have it and make it available to us for each year for the past 5 years up till now.
I'm happy.
Noted, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Maseko, I recognize you.
Chair, can I request that maybe we communicate through you, we communicate with SAGA also to include us as they have the engagement with the municipality. They always do have these training programs that they do, that they include us in those trainings so that we can have an indication of what types of trainings that they do have. Yes, they organize in different portfolios.
Okay.
We used to have that relationship that they will do that, and then we can also be exposed to what is in there.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko. We will communicate that sort of, and perhaps, we when we engage with SAGA also on the 10th of August, then we can just put that on the table with them at that particular meeting, and then we can take it from there. Okay, colleagues, that concludes resolutions, actions. The committee report, can you put up the minutes of the
Honorable Makamba Buja, mute yourself.
I did just thank you.
Yeah, could we have the minutes for the 10th of May? Now, colleagues, some of us weren't part of that meeting. The members, Bertha was chairperson and Barton was there and Ms. Maseko was there, certainly, and Honorable Dugmo. These minutes were distributed to members. Just check your attendance. Can you move down? Page 2, that's page 1, any corrections and amendments? Page 2.
Chairperson.
Yes, Honorable Makamba Boita.
I think I missed page 1 because I wanted to check if my apology was rendered.
Okay.
I'm not
Yes,
sure it's reflecting.
Yes, it's there, Honorable Makamba Boita.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask members just to lower their hands so that, give me a better indication as to. Okay, the third page, any corrections, omissions? Last page, any corrections and additions and omissions? Okay, that's the minutes of the 10th of May. Do I have a proposal that we adopt the minutes and second it? Honorable Maseko? I recognize you.
Honorable Maseko proposed that we adopt the minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Is there perhaps a seconder? We don't know seconder. We don't require a seconder to adopt the minutes.
That's fine. I second that, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Jagmo, as a seconder. We will then move on to the second set of minutes dated the 13th of June. Again, this particular meeting was simply just to elect the current chairperson. So it was a very brief meeting on the 13th of June. Jan, can you move over to the next page? And that's the end of it. It's just that the meeting was convened just to, since a change in chairpersonship, to elect a new chairperson. Is there any mover that we adopt this minutes of the 13th of June?
I move that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Ms. Seku. Any seconder for completeness? Thank you, Honourable Dagmar. If not, it is duly adopted. Yeah, and then we move on to the next set of documentation, and that's quarterly reports for the months of April, May, and June. Right, so for the most of the quarter, I was not the chairperson. The chairperson was Honourable Botha from the 1st of March till the 12th of June. So this report was also sent on to Honourable Botha to check the accuracy of the information contained herein, and I have on record communication from Honourable Botha that she is happy with the content of this report. So I asked members who were previously members of the committee, Honourable Maseku and Kambaboita and Honourable Dagmo, just to check whether your attendances have been recorded correctly. The report was circulated to all of us, and whether there's any matter that you'd like to highlight that needs to be corrected or amended or whatever. So, colleagues, this is the report. We didn't have a cluster visit, and there's no other workshops, invitations, etc. And that basically is just, you know, brings us to the end of the chart. Can you just move on? So just as a budget, we haven't spent at that stage any of the money. We still have 100,000. And yeah. Honourable van der Westhuizen, I recognize you.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Just if we could go back to that table regarding attendance. I pride myself on my attendance record. Now, there have been some changes in terms of the committee, and I'm just, you know, if you look there, it doesn't indicate that, you know, we've been moving in and out of the committee, it seems. So I don't know how, you know, those marks, if you look next to my name, for example, it shows that I've only attended one of the meetings.
Yeah.
But I don't think I you know, are really required to be, you know, in all of those meetings. So perhaps there could be some indication of whether one was, can I call it absent without apology, or whether or absent because of, you know, absenteeism, or whether one's lack of presence was just because you were not a member or a full-time member of the committee at the time. Could we perhaps get some indication of how that should be interpreted?
Chairperson, in the beginning of the quarterly report, I indicated until when a member was a member of the committee, or from which date a member is a member of the committee. If there is not a AB for absent or AP for apology next to the member's name, then it simply would mean that you were not a member of that specific committee at the time, because hence we put the dates in the beginning of the quarterly report. We could maybe indicate just that maybe a no more member or something like that next to the members' names, if member van der Westhuizen would like that, but that's how we indicate whether they are members.
Honourable van der Westhuizen, please guide us here in terms of what you think ought to that will satisfy you. Perhaps, Johan, what we can say is that from the 1st of March 2021 till we don't have the end date next to the member's name at the beginning of the report.
Okay, Chairperson, I'll amend that. So you would say
May
from
I
when they were a member.
From when till when?
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that, Chair.
Can I raise something
Yes,
alluding
please.
to that, please? Because now, there is a system that you've been using, Johan, and if the member is still an alternate in the committee. So when you say not a member, I mean, maybe what you can do is to have I don't know, something, but when you say not a member, you get what I mean? It's going to now all the time you have to change those notes. Now alternate member, now member, now alternate. So you need to.
Look, the members that's on the quarterly report are the members of the standing committee in terms of the as tabled in the ATC. If you, for instance, if you look at next to member Maseko's name, she has been a member of the committee right from the beginning of this term. So if she should be replaced on this committee, I would then just put a date in until the 1st of August.
Okay.
So member van der Westhuizen was a member right from the beginning of the term until the 28th of February. The fact that there's no mark next to his name now means that he is no longer a member of this committee. If he was and he wasn't present, I would either put absent because he didn't submit an apology, but he's a very responsible member, so he always places apologies. So I'll then put an AP next to his name as an apology was received.
Thank you. Thank you. Honourable van der Westhuizen, are you happy with the sort of suggestion on the table that we, do it the way, Jan has presented to us?
I accept that explanation, Chair, and perhaps we could in future just look at a third kind of sign, like not applicable or something like that. Thank you.
Okay.
Noted, Chair.
Noted. Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. So that's the report. Can I have a proposal that we adopt the report as presented?
I move that we adopt, Chair.
There's a mover that we adopt the report. Can I get a seconder?
You don't have to have a seconder.
We don't need a seconder. Thank you. The report is duly adopted. Can I then move on to the next report? And that's an oversight visit to the Western Cape District municipalities. Jan, can we just deal with that one?
Yeah, Chair, it's to the Western Cape Disaster Management Centre.
Oh, Disaster Management Centre.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, again, colleagues, Honourable Bertha was the chairperson. The delegation consists of the following members, only Honourable Bertha and Honourable van der Westhuizen. And it was to the Western Cape Disaster Management Centre. Page 1, any additions or amendments? Page 2, Honourable van der Westhuizen, any addition and amendments? Page 3. There were no resolutions taken at the meeting. I may also add, colleagues, that this sort of report is also forwarded to Honourable Bertha for her acquiescence, that she could check for accuracy, etc. And we have confirmation from Honourable Bertha that the report is a true reflection of what transpired on that particular day at that particular venue at the time. Could I then ask members, is there a proposal that we adopt the report?
Chair,
Honourable van der Westhuizen.
as the only one in this meeting that also attended that visit, I can confirm that the report is an accurate reflection. So I would support the adoption of the report. But if you would allow me just 2 remarks, thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you. You may make
Yes.
those remarks.
On the visit itself, Chair, ironically, at that time, we were not experiencing load shedding. And Mr. Colin Diner, the head of that disaster management center, indicated that that was currently for him the biggest single risk for the Western Cape and the Western Cape's economy was the whole issue of electricity provision. And I think we also need to take cognizance that, while Eskom has been managing the lack of sufficient electricity quite well through load shedding, that there is still a risk of, a total collapse of the electrical infrastructure system in South Africa. That was the first observation that I wanted to share with you. And the second one is just, I think we really have a center here where we as a province can truly be extremely proud of. While disasters are always disasters and also always bring a lot of hardship with them, I think the capacity in the Western Cape to manage potential disasters is really something which we can be very proud of as members of the provincial legislature in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen, for sort of bringing that to our attention. Something that we often take for granted because we don't experience a disaster. So it's good to know that in the event of a possible disaster, that we have the capabilities to deal with that sort of disaster. Thank you so much. Shayan, the last report that deals with the committee's business plans and budgets and program for this financial year, stretching from now onwards or earlier till the end of the financial year. So colleagues, the background to this is that we were requested to submit to the powers that be, the Speaker's Office, our business plan for the financial year, so that adequate budgetary provision can be made for us to fulfill our constitutional mandate, and that is our oversight function. So this report is a response to that, is all the envisaged activities that we will undertake and the costs associated with that. I may also mention that this is not cast in stone. It might change, provided that the reason to change it. And the very first change that
I'm sorry, Chairperson, to interject. Member Cameron Dagmore, you are coughing to your mic. Mute your mic, as I believe.
The very first change, thank you, Honourable Mr. The very first change is the catering costs for today's meeting, Jan. So that need to be, I don't know, because we would have had this meeting in person, but due to the AG's office not being sort of amenable to having the meeting in person, we then switch it to virtual, and therefore I want to know, Jan, whether we have incurred any costs.
Chairperson, no, we didn't incur any cost. I because we projected it and I worked on it some time ago, I didn't adjust it now. Can I take this opportunity and just ask you about our next meeting on the 10th? Do you want to do it an in-person one, or would you like it also to be virtual? Then I can just adjust this one.
Then we can have, my view is that we have it virtual. We don't need to have it in person.
Thank you, Chair.
It might
Okay.
change.
What's that, Honourable Seku?
It might change.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it might change because, you know, it's a new normal. Let's move on here to the next August, September item, August. Brief the department on the investigation, Jan, that we'll probably have an in-person meeting there.
Noted, Chair.
And perhaps what you can add there is also the section 139 proclamations.
Chair, may I ask?
Yes, please.
I'm trying to find out. The business plan is like a new norm, like COVID. So I'm trying to find out. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find out because usually our program in standing committees is a moving target.
Mm.
Now, if it comes to us to adopt as we see it here, is it going to have a note that says we adopted with the changes that we anticipate might happen and also the costings? Because I'm thinking that we might have all this with the cost that is there, but it might be that at the end it's more than what you anticipated because of one reason or another. Now, if we have to adopt it within the committee, we adopt the idea or we adopt the actual document of the business plan. I'm trying to find rationale for it that now we have to adopt to this norm of the business plan that all the years it has been a moving target, that it's really necessary that we adopt it, or we should continue with our draft program like we were using the draft program and not the business plan like now. I'm just, it's
Good
just question, yeah.
Good question. I think that my personal view is that there should be a great deal of flexibility around it, and I don't think that it is a fixed sort of plan that we cannot deviate from it should the need arise. But I think your concern is very valid, and when we do present it tomorrow at the chairpersons for a meeting, and then we can raise that again and get clarity. But for now, we will adopt this report on the basis that it can change. It is not cast in stone. And that's how it's been in the past, and we don't know what the future holds and where a serious intervention or oversight intervention need to take place. It's not on the plan, and we need to do it, and we simply just have to deviate from the plan.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, Jan. Okay, Honourable Maseko, are you happy with that?
I'm happy with that. I looked at it since Johan sent to us, and I'm adopting it as it's in front of me.
Anyway, thank you. We move on to next. It's in September, I think. It's a cluster visit week that we will have. The details around it is not being finalized yet. But that will be our contribution towards the cluster week. We have basically work around a figure of 21,780 Rand. It can change depending on the actual costs that we will incur. So that is merely just for transport, accommodation, and those other what things that we will incur. And then we have a slot there in September that hasn't really been defined yet as to what we will do. There's no cost associated to that as yet. And then in October, we start with the annual report cycle. That's obligatory public participation process, deals with advertisements and catering. This annual report cycle will obviously be in person, but the adoption of the report after engaging in the annual report will be done virtually, because it is a very short sort of meeting that if we need to have it in the chambers, we can have it online. And then in November, we that's it, and then we have also October, November, we have the adjustment budget, second adjustment that will be in chambers. The cost is largely for one advertisement and catering. And then January, what's it, Jan?
Chairperson, I've just utilized a slot.
We don't conclude the processes in
That's
December.
correct.
Yeah. Okay, and then in February or late January, we will have another cluster visit as is customary over the years. The beginning of the financial year before SOPA, we have a cluster visit. And again, the cost associated with that is stated. And then we will have the budget vote that is after this, the SOPA. It will be done in chambers. That's a cost associated with that particular process. So in total, we have a projected budget of 100,000 Rand, but we have so far sort of managed to, to come up with, and it can change, is slightly over budget, but not majorly over budget. It's probably just about 30,000 Rand over budget, which is minuscule compared to the enormous tasks that we are tasked to do. And certainly, if need be, that it might change. We will not shift it downwards, but we'll definitely shift it upwards. Any comments, colleagues, that you'd like to make? This is the plan that's going to be presented tomorrow at the Chairperson's Forum. And, if need be, we can provisionally accept it. It will be presented, and then we'll probably come back again and then have a review and those kind of things. So I think, as Honorable Secretary said, I mean, it's not cast in stone. It's fluid, can change, but it's a guide as to the things that we anticipate to be doing over the course of this financial year. But that's it. I'm trying to solicit any comments on Honorable van der Westhuizen. Is that the new hand? Is it old hand? Legacy hand?
Legacy.
Old hand, sorry.
Okay, no, legacy. So colleagues, can I take it that that we provisionally approve the plan as it's stated here? We will periodically come back and check in on the plan and see whether it is still relevant for the matters that we have indicated today, whether it is still relevant for us to move with that item forward. Okay, can we accept it on that basis?
Yes, Chair, we accept on that basis, and if it can be, because it's in the committee, somewhere we can put that note on this document that it's on that basis, that it's a flexible document, and that it will be in order that we approve it as we see it. Chair, and also to say, no, we are led. We
Okay.
will follow.
Thank you, Honorable Seko. I appreciate that comment, and we will duly do so. And I give you my commitment that we will certainly, make it sort of as transparent and as inclusive and as participatory as possible for our members to engage with the content hereof. So that brings us to the end of the meeting, colleagues. Thank you so much. My first meeting of the committee, fully fledged. I thank you for your engagement and participation in the meeting. I thank Honourable van der Westhuizen in particular, on very short notice, availed himself to stand in for Honourable Mackenzie, who also received an invitation to join the Minister of Transport on very short notice, I may add. And so, Honourable van der Westhuizen, I thank you so much for your participation and presence. For the other members, Honourable Dugmore, Honourable Bakamba Boita, Honourable Maseko, thank you also for your participation and direction in the meeting and highlighting the issues that are important for us to have a sharper focus on. As the procedural officer, senior procedural officer, Jan Vermeulen, IT support, Clarence Issa, secretarial support in Fundu, and also procedural officer Johan Kutse. Thank you so much for all the work and logistical support that you have provided to the committee and to myself. It is much appreciated, and I think that the matters that we dealt with today is of critical importance to ensure that we have a Western Cape government, in particular Western Cape municipalities, that are well equipped and well supported to fulfill their mandate and execute the task with the necessary efficiency and effectiveness to deliver the services that our people deserve. And with that said, colleagues, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a lovely